Welcome to the Shulamite Podcast, an extension of Shulamite Ministries and Shulamite.com, with weekly interviews and teaching with author and speaker Martha Kilpatrick and hosted by John Enslow. This weekly podcast is a way to stay connected to the ministry. So come experience anointed messages, not giving just another method, but a living impartation.
I've never really thought about it. I've just never laid it out like that the faith that he's requiring and the faith that brings him pleasure is the faith that is dependent and in relationship. I mean, it's obvious, but I've never laid it out that way, never to see it. I just said, oh, well, it's impossible to please God without faith. I just thought it was, you just believe me because I said so kind of thing. You know how the parents used to...
It takes the relationship out again. Just to say, okay, you said it, I believe it. No, it doesn't work that way, except in the flesh. It's always, faith comes from our hearing, and hearing by the word, rhema, of God. So simple. Oh, and it's so simple, too, because Jesus lived that way. He said to the disciples, I think it's John 14 somewhere, he said, as I judge, as I hear, I judge. As I hear, I judge. In other words, he didn't judge until he heard. That's how he lived. That's how he will live inside of me if I let him be the existence instead of me.
How tragic that I pulled the relationship out of faith, though. That's frightening.
It's taking the life out of it. The life is his life. The just shall live by faith.
But I could say that I've at times seen it as you just believe because I said so, rather than entering into a hearing, diligently seeking pleasurable relationship. That's a totally different way of looking at faith. Oh, how the enemy would really love it to be something cold, something logical.
Knowledgeable. The tree of death is tree of knowledge.
But even to take what you said and then to just believe you because you rather than to take it into relationship, that's tragic.
I love the definition of faith in the Amplified, except that the process to this is not stated. It's leaning of the entire human personality on God in confident trust that he is God, something like that. It's the definition of faith in the Amplified is leaning, absolute dependence. But to come to that, that's when you have faith. It's when what you're talking about. That's when you have faith. It's when you're totally dependent on him. There's no other source of help. There's no other source of wisdom. There's no other source of life. That's when you're dependent on him.
The Amplified says of faith, it says, whoever believes in, trusts in, clings to, relies on. That's faith.
Is that the New Amplified?
No, that's the classic. Yeah.
Okay.
Faith perceiving as real fact what is not revealed to the senses.
Yeah. If God says you are well, all the evidence to the contrary is a lie.
Leaning of the
entire personality.
Yeah, there you go. Hold fast to faith, that leaning of the entire personality on God in absolute trust and confidence.
What's the reference? 1 Timothy?
That was 1 Timothy 1:19.
Yeah. Do you remember when you wrote a post and you talked about leaning on the breast of God? That was a rhema word for me. That became a living word from God, and even in this moment, it's such a terrific image He gave me through your words. That was a rhema, and there are times when that has deeply comforted me and been very real, and that's what that verse evokes for me now. Leaning of the entire personality on him with faith and confidence in him. You know, John, that just is an example of that you live life listening for His word. You're not listening for knowledge. You're not listening for information. You're not listening. You're listening for His voice everywhere. And His voice came to me through your writing. And it has stayed, and it's been a seed of light within me, a seed of life and comfort. It was a living word. See, it's living. God's voice is a living source for life to us. If we can hear Him speak, we have life. That's what Jesus meant when He said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. It's life. There's a difference between His divine life and just human existence. To hear Him is to obtain life. Faith is living. Real faith is living. It's vibrant, has its own power, has its own growth and its own pathway. And when His voice enters you, it grows in dark inside of you. And sometimes it isn't evident that you have the faith that you've heard, because all life begins in darkness. Think about it. It's so true. It's even the seed of God's voice. But see what happened in that. You got a word from Him of life. We're not supposed to give knowledge. We're supposed to impart life to each other. When a speaker speaks, it is supposed to impart life to others, not words or information or facts or explanations. We're supposed to have such life in us that it goes out to others just as His life goes out to us. Isn't that wonderful?
Absolutely.
That's what happened. You heard Him. You wrote His word in that post.
I heard Him, and that's what He said, and then I wrote it, and then, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then
it impacted you.
It came to me as life. So that means, that's why you can read a book by someone that lived 200 years ago, and it will absolutely be as fresh as this minute. It's because if the person writes from the Spirit, that cannot die. That writing is full of capacity of the Spirit to use for life. Because the Spirit originated it, then the Spirit continues it.
It's source, isn't it?
It's all about source. And the source is God. And He conveys life in a number of ways, but by His voice. He actually imparts life into you. That's what it all means. It's wondrous. And we settle for less. I thank Him. I just want to stop and thank Him for speaking to us, for being willing to, for being such a Father. How great the love of God that we should be called the children of God. And a father speaks to his children. He parents his children. Whew. Glory.
We hope you've enjoyed the Shulamite podcast. For all the latest from Shulamite Ministries, please visit us at shulamite.com, where you'll find Martha's daily devotions, posts from getalongwithgod.com, and the online library of all of Martha's writings. At shulamite.com, downloading the free Shulamite app is easy, and livingchristianbooks.com is only a click away. Thank you for joining us on this journey to discover a God worth knowing.